Hello and welcome. I'm Marianne Fessenden from AMTS, and this is the Nutritionist webinar. Thank you for joining us. Today we are joined by Dr. Tom Tylutki, CEO of AMTS. While it is always tempting to jump right into the video, it would be hubris for me to assume you all know Tom's history. For those of you who do, I won't be too long. Tom was raised on a 65-cow dairy farm in eastern New York State. He attended Cornell University, where he received his BS Master's and PhD in animal science. Tom's PhD work focused on predicting phosphorus excretion of cattle and implementing Six Sigma quality control principles on commercial dairy farms. Upon completing his PhD in 2002, he continued with the development of CNCPS and began consulting with the feed industry. In 2005, he left Cornell University to start Agricultural Modeling and Training Systems, AMTS. As a co-inventor of CNCPS, Tylutki has been focusing on ensuring the core biological model is implemented correctly for day-to-day ration formulation. In his role at AMTS, Tom, his partners Caroline, Vijay, and Lynn, and their team develops, trains, and provides nutritional technical support for nutritionists and feed industry globally. Tom has over 150 publications, including journal articles, book chapters, extension articles, and popular press articles. He is a member of the American Registry of Professional Animal Scientists, where he is a board-certified animal nutritionist. In addition to AMTS, Tylutki is a partner in a large dairy farm in New York State. His wife, Bonnie, is a veterinarian, and they have 2 children. They all live near Ithaca, New York. As I told Tom, even though the Nutritionist webinars are meant to be separate from our core business of selling and supporting our CNCPS-based ruminant nutrition software, we have had speakers whose work and research may not wholly agree with the model, and we do not feel that that is a conflict of information. Some concepts evolve, and that cannot happen in stasis. I do make no apologies for asking Tom to speak, and to speak often. Tom's initial experiences in extension, position as our resident polymath, and his abilities in understanding and explaining multifaceted issues make him a critical resource in ruminant nutrition education. When we set up the schedule for 2021, we intended to have Tom come back nearly at the end to wrap up what was intended to be a glorious year of exciting farm tours with nutritional experts around the world. Those of you who have watched all year, and thank you, know our tours have not always been as glorious as hoped. Sound issues and video snafus have been a plague. Videography is not the main skill of our speakers, and it's not what we asked them here for. We did want the experience to be as authentic as possible without veering into the unwatchable. You may have noted that we switched Tom and Daniel Scawthorne. Daniel had a conflict and Tom was able to oblige. Our team discussions on topics ranged from poking the bear with discussion of the new information presented at the NRC webinars, but it's not yet published, and an ingredient-focused discussion. We are happy to have finally defeated the sound issues and delighted to have Tom talk about replacement heifers, birth to transitioning to milking, with a tour through the facilities of the same upstate New York dairy he has featured in his previous videos. As a brief weather report, last year you saw beautiful sun. In February, Tom had to struggle through snowdrifts. In this video, you get to see some typical autumn rain. Enjoy the presentation and remember to enter your questions or requests for elaboration in the chat or Q&A windows.
Hi everyone, welcome to this month's webinar, and we're going to focus on heifers this month actually. Marianne kept asking me what was I going to do, and we've always had discussions on heifers and lots of questions. So that's where we're going to focus on. I'm going to introduce a couple new concepts as well that I've been thinking about that I want to more fully develop here in the near future. We're back here at the farm that I did the earlier webinar on. And we're going to go through the entire heifer program that I do here. And going to challenge people on some thinking. As I was thinking about how to do this, there's some things that really popped into my mind that I think are going to lead to some pretty good discussion. So the first thing that we're going to do actually is let's think about some of these new concepts. Okay, so the first new concept that I want to throw out, and this is the one that I'm going to really focus on a lot of future thinking, is one that I think many of us around the world think about, but we really don't talk about. We're actually challenged by this three-way now. It used to just be two-way, but now I added a third component to it that really is our balancing act. And that is what I'm calling biological optimal nutrition, BON, versus FON, which is financially optimal nutrition. And then there's an EON, environmentally optimal nutrition. These are not equal. They in a perfect world, they would all converge and be equal with biologically optimal nutrition. But in reality, they almost never are. We will almost always see where financially optimal nutrition is less than biologically optimal. And that's driven by feed cost, as well as limitations on the farm, and probably by the most by how milk is priced. If we're in a fluid market, we might not go after full amino acid formulation because that's actually pretty expensive. At the same time, we know if we manipulate some fatty acids in the pre-fresh and fresh period, we can have some awesome opportunities with repro. But is it financially justifiable to do that always? Environmentally, well, at first I was like, well, this is going to equal biologically optimal nutrition. But we know that's not true. Let's think about pasture animals, pure pasture. It might be financially optimal and it might be very good environmentally, but it's far from biologically optimal nutrition. So I want you to be thinking about these as we go through some of the things we're going to do today, but just to think overall in terms of how we formulate diets. So we're actually starting here on the farm in the calf kitchen, basically. And to give you an idea, so this facility was built a couple years ago. It was the second little calf barn that was built. Historically, everything had been done in hutches. And if we step out, I have a bunch more data and papers to show you and everything. So we still do use some hutches, okay? And calves are in hutches primarily now up until about day 22, I think. And then they come into this first facility. This is the newer one. It's a sturdy built barn. It's a little company in Pennsylvania that does these calf nurseries. They're really kind of nice. They're a kit barn. They come in and build it pretty quick. And by the default design has you can do 3 individual pens with these plastic dividers that you can then pull and make into groups of 3. Now, I wish that they made them so that we could do groups of 4, because there is data showing that we should always have even numbered animals in pens, so that everyone always has a buddy. But it is what it is. We are pretty much the current young stock manager. When calves move into this barn, she's letting them adapt in individual pens for a couple days. Okay, and then they are going on to these small groups. We're in the process of changing some things where there's going to be a pasteurizer that'll be going in on the farm here. I don't know, it depends on finances, and everyone knows how awesome the dairy industry is. So got it priced out, working on the plan to get it done. Feed 3 times a day, as I've said. Whole milk morning and night at a graduated rate, and then a milk replacer feeding at noon. Just looking at the cost of the milk replacer, the operational cost, not including operations cost or maintenance or anything, but replacing that with the pasteurizer, that'll pay for itself in a couple years. Plus, I know we're giving up some average daily gain and some calf health by using raw waste milk, not to mention shifts in temperature and everything from the time milk is put in the tank and then delivered to the calves, especially during the winter. We definitely have some challenges. The calf grain is a low starch, high NDF, a lot of fermentable NDF in it, pellet. Calves are offered that from day 2, day 3 of life, as well as water right away from day 2, day 3 of life. We just did a change in our weaning program here. It used to be a pretty abrupt weaning system where calves would be fed 3 times a day. On day 49, on day 50, and day 51, they would be fed twice a day, and day 52, no more milk. We just changed it to where we're stepping it down over 10 days, and we did some weights, and we definitely saw some pretty impressive improvements in average daily gain through that period, to the point where the calves that were on the abrupt breeding system for a week gained, pound a day maybe, maybe even less on some of them that we measured. While the ones that we did the step down really had a small blip in average daily gain during that period, to the point where it's very clear, and it was finally we were able to implement this change. I've been wanting to implement this change for years on the farm, but it's always been an issue of labor and labor management concerns about being able to do that. So after they are weaned, now in a perfect world, I would be saying that right away at like day 60, they would be leaving this facility and moving into bedded pack, small groups. But like most farms, we're backed up on animal numbers. You expand number of cows, got to expand your feed storage, got to expand your heifer facilities. So it's manure storage, everything. And it's the heifer system that right now is overcrowded, and it's a constraining factor. But the plan is next year to replace one barn and make it bigger and reduce that overcrowding issue. As you can see, these sturdy built barns, they are open. There's curtains on the front that when it's really cold can be closed, and on the back there's curtains. Yes, that means that the person taking care of the calves is still exposed out here in the environment. But since we put this first one up, I think it's been 5 or 6 years now, the calf health in these little facilities is phenomenal. It's actually a lot nicer than working with hutches because it's actually cooler in the summer. And during the winter, you close those curtains on the front and back, and it's pretty nice in these. And of course, as we walk by, we have one calf coughing. Isn't that normal? So after weaning, they come into this pack facility. Okay. And this is the facility that will be replaced next year. It was built in 1996. It's fully depreciated, and it is time. It's had a lot of money put into it over the years. but it's too small, and structurally it's not great. But performance-wise, okay, so I did some calculations. I went through Dairy Comp because we have 3 sets of scales, so I have all sorts of numbers. I took just 20 animals, pretty much the last 20 animals that were moved where we had weights, and started looking at what kind of gains and everything we get. And I will tell you that from birth, our average birth weight for those 20 animals was 80 pounds. That included a set of twins. If I knocked those out, our average birth weight was 82 pounds on heifers, or 37.3 kilos. At about 90 days of age, we have a body weight of 236 pounds, so an average daily gain from birth to that period of 1.83 pounds, or 829 grams. That's up. That's actually nice to see that being up, because all the numbers we've had previously have included that weaning slump, and would always be we're up probably 100 grams by changing that weaning system. When they come in here, they are still being fed some calf starter in this first pen. Okay, and then also the high cow TMR, and they remain on the high cow TMR until 6 months, and it really does fit their nutritional requirements really nicely, to the point where through this facility, so my next weaning, my next body weight is somewhere between 6 and 7 months. And the average weight at that time is 564 pounds, 256 kilos, and we've averaged 2.89 pounds a day gain, so 1,314 grams. And as we go down and look at these little girls, you will see that we get down to the oldest ones in this barn, which are going to be about 4 or 5 months of age. And again, these animals are in this facility only. They have no access to any pasture. Okay, so we'll see if we start evaluating body condition score at this stage. Okay, for typical freestyle type heifers, we don't have fat heifers in this area. Okay, we be looking at these girls. You'll see they are in a good level of body condition, absolutely, but we do have really nice frame on them, and good muscle development. Okay, we aren't dealing with fat heifers at this stage. It's awfully difficult to make fat heifers at this stage if you have adequate levels of protein going into the diet. And that, again, the high cow TMR is a perfect fit for these animals. Now, you may wonder, I say that, why don't I do a specific TMR for heifers of this age? I could further fine-tune this diet, absolutely. It's just like when we get into the open heifers and the bred heifers. They are actually fed the same TMR as well. And I could make it more precise, okay? At this farm size, though, it's really difficult to do. And we're talking 800 cows, so another 750, 800 heifers. A challenge is when we sit down and figure out the cost of making a mix. Okay, it is not just the value of the ingredients. it is actually the cost of actually making the mix. And I see this actually all around the world, where farms will look at purchasing a TMR mixer, and they look at the initial capital cost, and it's high. So they buy a smaller mixer. What they don't realize is their operating cost every day goes up tremendously. So instead of having higher fixed costs, their variable costs are higher. And that comes into play with how I put together some diets where I will reduce the amount of mixes. To give you an idea, okay, and we can argue about the numbers that I used in doing this, but if we take a payloader or a tractor and loader, whatever your desire is, and value it at $90 an hour. If we take the mixer, be it pull behind or truck mounted, ours is truck mounted, and if we value that at $180 an hour, and then going through FeedWatch, I looked at how long it basically takes to make a load. Now, making a smaller load really doesn't change the amount of time that much, because you're still going, most of the time is actually going back and forth either between the bunks or between the commodity bays. So the number of trips doesn't change that much. So I figured half of the time, and here we average about 32 minutes to make a load, from when it started until it's unloaded. So I figured the full 30 minutes for the mixer and half that time for the loader. So it's costing, every load of TMR that I have made here cost $112, okay, in equipment costs, equipment and labor costs. So if I can feed 245 heifers off that load, that's 46 cents per heifer per day. If I split it and make 2 loads though, so only 122 heifers, I'm now 92 cents a heifer in equipment costs. This adds up really quick when we start making additional loads. Okay, every load $100 in equipment costs, and that doesn't include the added time. Suddenly, if I say I'm going to feed this barn, these transition heifers, their own mix, well, we just added a half an hour to feeding time. Okay, and when we're already dealing with 9-10 loads, now you add another half hour, and if we split a couple more other loads out, we have a real time factor in terms of labor scheduling. So there's an economic side, absolutely. It's a huge economic number that I think everyone should think about, and we probably should even add this somewhere into our either formulation systems or our feed management systems as to what is that true cost, because it's over and above what we typically consider. Okay, so like I said, high cow TMR, if you want to see the diet, I'm happy to show you. You know, it's formulated for like 110 pounds of milk, so 48 kilos, full amino acid formulation. There is some added fat to it to address the C16 to 18:1 ratio to get milk fat, yada, yada, all that stuff. If you are doing transition heifers with AMTS, and if you're trying to formulate a specific diet for them, I urge you to try and just apply the recipe to these transition heifers, and you will be surprised at how well nutritionally it fits this stage of animal. All right, we're going to go to the next group of heifers. Okay, so we're down here at the next heifer facility. In this first pen, these are 6 and 7 month old girls, and this is their transition pen, okay, from going from bedded pack to learning how to use freestalls. Again, this facility was built in 1996, and it's not bad. I mean, it's concrete beds with sawdust, plenty of sawdust on them. It's the manure is scraped out daily, and these girls are still fed the high cow TMR. What we found was if we change housing structure like this. So they're going from a group of 20, 25 to a group of 40, going from bedded pack to free stalls. And if we change the diet at the same time, we would have some pretty severe outbreaks of ringworm, and regardless of the time of year. And if I look through here, there's some ringworm evident. We're at the end of summer, early fall, so we don't see a lot of ringworm this time of year, but this is the pen that we always see it. If I don't change the diet, so if I maintain them on the high cow TMR for this extra month or so, the incidence of health issues goes down tremendously. It's just that, I think it's just that added level of stress. It's one additional stressor that hits their immune system so hard that it's really would cause us to have some stumbles through this pen. Nothing else special to say about them. You look, body condition score, again, pretty moderate. Okay, these are the easy girls. These feeding these young heifers like this is really like feeding the lactating herd, the mature herd, because their protein requirements are so high. We can get them to grow really efficiently and not really have to worry a lot about fattening of them. It's when we start getting into this next pen that things start to get a little bit more challenging, and from a formulation standpoint really can cause everyone a lot of headaches that I've seen all over. So this is kind of a intermediate pen. We're not breeding in here yet. They're going to be 7 to 9 or 10 months of age. And they're at that stage where we're watching them for heats and recording heats. You'll see that over the last year, the farm has implemented an activity system in this facility for heifers. You can tell by the color of the collars what brand it is. I won't say anything else about it unless specifically asked. But we're recording all observed heats in here, either visual or through activity. And they're at that funny stage in physiological development that they're starting to shift from protein deposition to more fat deposition. And this diet in these two pens is where, especially if we have a deficiency of protein or excess lactic acid in the diet, we can see these heifers pack on adipose tissue in a month. Now we're overcrowded. We don't limit feed. Okay, I despise limit feeding for many reasons. But what we do to control this diet, to control fat and behavior of the heifers, really, anyone who spends time with lots of heifers know that heifers are like teenagers, and if they don't have something to do, they get bored and destroy barns. Okay, you can see that little building in the middle there. So in the last 20 years, I think that's the third time or fourth time that there's been new plywood put on it, because the heifers will eat it. You can see how well they're licking it and keeping it clean already for us. They like their clean little buildings. But I full feed them, and I control that intake and the calorie intake basically by the quality of the forage. Now, being here in the northern hemisphere and being here in upstate New York, we can do that pretty easily by some of our forage species selection. We use for heifers and dry cows, it's a cool season grass. It's reed canary grass is what we're using right now. We're trying our first field of one of the improved fescues that we'll harvest it next year, mainly because we couldn't get reed canary seed this year. and we harvest it mature. Okay, so this reed canary, when we're harvesting it for the heifers and dry cows, will actually be 2.5 meters tall. And at that point, okay, here's a sample of it. It'll be mid 60s on NDF. It will still be, it'll still have 12-14% protein because we apply nitrogen fertilizer. But I'm not feeding it really for the protein. I'm feeding it for the controlled energy and the fiber. And it fits really, really well. I don't have to worry about having too high of energy in these diets because I can control it. I can control their intakes. I can let them eat as much as they want based on this type of grass silage. And they do great on it. These heifers at this stage have probably the lowest nutritional requirements that they're going to have throughout their life. So it's really nice to be able to use this. Now, I don't formulate the diets for these heifers. Okay, I formulate for this pen. This pen is right around we'll start breeding in this pen. So these are yearlings, 11, 12 months of age, 21 month age of first calving. So we got to get them pregnant, 12 months. I don't formulate for these girls. They have the lowest requirements. The next pen that we'll go up to, which are the early bred heifers, they too have some of the lowest requirements in their lifetime. And if we formulate specifically for those groups, and we feed that to the younger heifers and to the later pregnant heifers, we are going to be deficient in protein primarily for those two other groups. So this again comes back to, if we were bigger, I would probably have a specific diet for this stage of heifer. But again, it comes back to that $100 a load of making a diet, of making a mix. So I actually formulate for all of these heifers after about 7 months based upon the requirements of these girls, these 7-8 month old heifers. Okay, they still have a pretty high protein requirement. And then I check this diet with the late bred heifers. Okay, because those are the two groups that have the highest protein requirements. That does mean I am overfeeding energy and protein, primarily protein, in these intermediate pens. That I will accept that any day because I know then there's my risk of getting excess body condition is lower. I also know that it's costing me some money. Okay, so let's look at what these diets are. So before I show you the diet, give you an idea of what kind of performance we're getting. So from 6 to 7 months up through this pen here. Okay, so up through the breeding pen because that's when I have the next weight. When they come out of this pen, their average weight is 735 pounds or 334 kilos. Now this is going to be 1 or 2 cycles pre-breeding, okay, that we get this body weight. And our average daily gain from that 6 to 7 month age up through this pen is 2.35 pounds or 1,069 grams. That may sound high to some people, but you got to remember, for us to have a 21 month age of first calving at the appropriate weight, I've got to be targeting an average daily gain from birth through calving of around 1 kilo a day, so about 2.2 pounds. So it's a linear, we're dealing with a linear growth curve. The diet itself, okay, try and hold 2 things with the wind not blowing it away. Okay, so there's some corn silage, the base diet, 7.2 pounds of dry matter, 11.7 pounds of dry matter of this grass silage. Do feed a little bit of Waybacks in this pen, in this diet, so about a kilo of dry matter. Right now it says cornmeal in there, but we're not feeding cornmeal right now. Cost of corn is pretty high. We actually ran out of high moisture a couple weeks ago, so it's actually a ground wheat. We were able to get ground feed wheat delivered for significantly less than cornmeal, so we're using wheat. It says soy plus, but it's not. It's a custom bypass soy blend that also has some amino acid, some methionine added to it that we use for the cows. And it was cheaper to use that than using soybean meal. I actually put the soybean meal that we used to have as a commodity into the protein mix for the cows, and we're bringing in this custom product, this custom bypass soy product with Metasmart on it on farm, and it's significantly cheaper actually at feeding 0.82 pounds per day versus feeding an equivalent MP amount of soybean meal. I think I knocked off 15 cents per heifer per day by doing that. So that was a real nice win for us. Dry matter intakes that I expect on these pens. Okay, so if we look at this is from FeedWatch. So if we start looking at so we're standing in front of pen 40. Okay, there's 109 animals in there, and we expect them. They're eating about. This is offered. Okay, I don't have Waybacks on these heifer diets. So about 16 and a half pounds of dry matter intake is what we see on these heifers. This was actually from Sunday. When we get into the older heifers, when we go up to that next barn, we'll actually have them up a little bit higher on intake. Still not as much as you would think. That's because they have access to a big exercise yard, basically 25-acre grass field. For each pen, and grass is still growing pretty good, so we're getting 2 or 3 pounds of dry matter intake out there on grass from them. We look at some of these younger pens. Okay, so like that pen 25 was those older heifers in that bedded pack barn. Okay, and they're eating we're offering them about 18 pounds of dry matter. Sounds pretty high, doesn't it? But if we put that on a percent of body weight, 17 pounds on 600 pound heifers. So, 2.5, around 3% of body weight on a diet like that, and doing that level of performance does kind of fit with what we would expect and what we're observing. Okay, so not keeping these girls fat is really my primary goal in this pen, and again, we're doing that by calorie dilution and letting them eat free choice. If I didn't have grass like this mid-60s NDF grass, I would probably be looking at using straw, low-quality grass, hays, anything that I can to avoid having to use limit feeding on heifers. Okay, next barn. All right. Now the next barn. So the pen on the left is breeding and early bred heifers. Okay, pen on the right, bred heifers. Will be in this pen up to about 6 or 8 weeks pre-calving. And same diet, again, like I said, I formulate for those younger ones on this diet and then follow it up and check it nutritionally, the nutritional status on this group. Remember, once they hit that 191 days, 190 days pregnant, the fetus, the conceptus, starts growing at an exponential rate and is going to account for about 650 grams, so about 1.5 pounds a day of her daily gain. If we were to run her over scales, about 1.5 pounds, that is the conceptus. So running them over scales, we've actually got to be achieving pretty high rates of gain to get them to the target that we want. Again, these girls have access to a big pasture, big exercise lot. So we know we're getting some intake on grass out there. So it's always hard during the summer, spring, summer, and early fall like this to get dry matter intakes on these girls because it is really dictated on how much grass is grown out there. Management challenges in this group. We have heel warts. This is the first group that we see heel wart. These two pens are the first pens we see heel warts in. What do? They're run through formaldehyde twice a week. And that does a really good job of controlling the warts through here. Can be a challenge during the winter because it'll be damn cold in here, and we've really got to keep an eye on making sure that we don't have too high of a concentration of the formaldehyde and burning feet. It's happened once or twice, but management concerns, management issues. Again, I haven't talked at all about heights. I don't measure heights. I'll glance through. You look through. You look down this feed rail. Okay. To give you an idea of the top of this feed rail, it is about 4 inches below my shoulder as I'm standing next to it. So you can see pretty uniform heights across these heifers. And again, it's maintaining body condition on these girls. Bit of a challenge, but what I have found for me on this farm, most of that challenge is if we harvest the grass too early, and I end up having to feed really high quality grass. Performance numbers, when I tell you some of the numbers that we see, some of the growth numbers in these pens over this last year, I will tell you they're down a little bit. And there's two reasons why our growth rates in these two pens are down a little bit. One is we had a young stock manager for maybe a year who was horrendous. To put it real simply, she sucked. She should have been taken out back with all the dead calves that she ended up with. The heifers, the calves that survived were definitely survival of the fittest, and yet at the same time we still see their gains depressed a little bit. And we had a couple months of breedings that the 21-day preg rates on these heifers, they sucked. And it all has to do with the slug of heifers that she was responsible for that all came through at once. We're talking average yearly gain loss on a slug of heifers of probably close to 0.5 pound a day. And those are the survivors. The lungers and any of them that looked really bad were all sold. So we're going to deal with that for a while. The other is our corn silage last year was terribly dry. 47, I was happy when we hit 47 dry matter. When we started feeding it, it was in the 60s on dry matter. Yes, 60s on dry matter. I used that on the heifers as much as possible. Caused some challenges with body condition score. I had some heifers that some periods where body condition score went up on these girls because it was more intestinally digested starch. And we know that goes more to body fat. And the other is cost me on trying to feed, having to feed some excess protein to try and maintain performance on these heifers. This year I'm looking forward to getting into 2021 corn silage when we do, because it's a much nicer looking crop so far, in terms of dry matter. just looking at it in terms of what the dry matter is that is being harvested at. We haven't had a frost yet. October 5th and no frost in upstate New York is an oddity, so we'll see where we end up. One more group of heifers to go to, and then we'll have some more discussion. Okay, so now we are in the close-up area, and close-up heifers and close-up cows are housed together. And again, it's being at that funny herd size where we really can't segregate. Now, any animal that you see in this pen that does not have a collar on them, which of course there's none of them up here eating, no, that's not true. It used to be that if they didn't have collars, they were heifers. But I'm thinking that with some of the shifts with the activity and like that some of these girls might have collars on. Okay, but I can tell you that these two girls right here are heifers. Okay, so I'm standing next to probably a third lactation cow. Okay, so you can see we have the frame. We have maintained body condition score nicely. There's a heifer right there with that you can see that is not obese. Let's come down to this pen. There's less fans. Okay, and if you look back in there, you'll see a Jersey. I'll come back and tell you the Jersey story shortly. Okay, let's find some heifers. The heifers are all laying down on the pack. Definitely what it appears like. Yep. Oh, there's nope, she's a cow. Huh. Okay, so we have I have another body weight, and that's when they get moved onto this barn at about 6 weeks pre-calving. And average body weight moving down here, raw, 1,296 pounds or 588 kilos, for an average daily gain of 1.84 pounds, 835 grams. However, you have to remember that includes some gain of the conceptus. So if I take out that anything over 190 days pregnant and calculate the conceptus gain, okay, so the weight then of her at about 6 weeks pre-calving is 1,238 pounds, 562 kilos, with a gain of 1.6 pounds and 726 grams. So that's actually a little low. Again, that's partially due to coming in out of summer like this, where I can't really get a good handle on how much grass they're eating, being overcrowded, and that really dry corn silage. While we're here, you'll see there's a couple jerseys in the calving pens. So the farm has decided, the parlor was built in 1995, and what we're finding is we're getting more and more cows that don't fit in the parlor anymore. So we're going to put together a pen, at least 120 of jerseys, being paid for components. It's actually a pretty nice deal, and they actually are going to fit through the facility a little bit better. Get here where there's a little bit less fan noise, I hope. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, so I'll show you a couple more things, everyone. Let me get my papers here right. So this is out of Dairy Comp, this graph it's an E-plot of body weight. Okay, So you can see pretty much have a straight line body weight increase from birth through about 6 weeks pre-calving. A little bit of noise in there, absolutely, and that is just the individual animal variation. Could I make it tighter? I would hope so. Some of it is overcrowding because that is a little bit wider range than we have historically had. I got to dig into that more, actually. I was surprised to see that level of variation. How does that follow through with what first lactation milk looks like? Well, here is a graph of first lactation animals, 7-day milk average, okay? You can see we have pretty decent peaks, but I can tell you that our peaks are down. Our peaks are down quite a bit over the last year. Probably in the 7 to 10 pound reduction in peak. Again, it's that really dry corn silage that came back to hit us. So here's peaks for first lactation animals over the last year. And I don't see them peak usually till around day 90 or so on first calf heifers. And you can see back 6-7 months ago, our average peaks were 95, 97, 93, versus now we're 87, 79. I don't know how many of those 79 pound cows are before 90 days in milk. My guess is that's not a true representation of where peak's going to be. That 87 is probably more realistic. So we have some challenges ahead of us that we'll slowly get there with better corn silage, I hope. I just wanted to show something real quick here. When we start talking about that change in body composition, because this really does dictate how we formulate. So if we look at relative stage of maturity of the animal, actual body protein content does this. Okay, body fat does this. This inflection point here where the two lines cross is about when puberty is. Okay, so that on a farm like this with the rates of gain we're doing, for us that's hitting us at about 6 months. Okay, and that those heifers, once they start coming into heat, their gains, if you start looking at average daily gains in those first couple of cycles, they look pretty bad. These girls just go goofy, really, and their intakes are all over the place. Their average daily gains are all over the place. They don't know what's going on with themselves. But again, that early phase here, there's so much body protein, so much frame growth that it's the most economical time to take advantage of frame growth and changing age of first calving. So you have to remember, if we want to change the age of first calving, once they're pregnant, okay, the clock is set. There's 280 days. So all we're going to change by changing the average daily gain post-pregnancy is the weight at calving. For us to change the age of first calving, it's changing pre-breeding average daily gain. Because we want them to be that magical 55% of mature weight, okay, at breeding. So for here, that means we're targeting like 400 kilos, 880 pounds for that breeding weight. And to do that in 12 months, okay, so 880 pounds, and we're averaging, we'll say 80 pound birth weight, so that's 800 pounds a gain in 365 days. Okay, so that is my target. That's my target average daily gain, is whatever the result of that is, and it's over 2 pounds a day. Is okay. So let's see, 2 pounds would be 730 pounds. So I got to be like a kilo a day from birth until first breeding to hit my growth, my body weight target at first breeding. And again, I keep harping on this, but it's so important. That is when it's the cheapest time to put frame and muscle on them. And like I said, when we were over by those transition calves, take a recipe, apply it to those young heifers in AMTS, and you will be surprised at how well a diet for 80 pounds of milk, 100 pounds of milk matches the requirements of those heifers. Beyond that, what I keep harping on as well, I'm watching body condition score on these animals. I will do anything I can to control body condition score. And you might have also noticed that the particle size on that grass silage is pretty big, is pretty long. Well, that's fine for me because I want them to spend the time eating and not getting into trouble eating barns. So I would much rather have them taking their time chewing and enjoying life, and me deciding what's going on in their daily schedule instead of them forcing us to do repairs on facilities all the time. We have enough of that with the two-legged animals that are around the place. Okay, I think that's about it for now, and we'll see you all when we're live, and ask questions, folks. That's what I'm here for.
We'll get to the question and answer period shortly. First, a little housekeeping. We are coming down to the last few webinars for the year. I appreciate recommendations for speakers, topics, and formats for next year's webinar. We are very excited next month to host Daniel Scawthorne of Scawthorne Nutrition in our November webinar. We were fortunate to host Daniel last year for a Canola Amazing webinar in March. Some of you may be familiar with Daniel from his informative and well-done LinkedIn posts. Raised in the dairy industry, Daniel's nutrition knowledge was gained through a bachelor's and a master of science at Dalhousie and the University of Saskatchewan in Canada. Daniel worked as a dairy feed advisor for Feed-Right in Alberta, then as the ruminant nutritionist with Co-op Feeds across Western Canada. Daniel and his wife Heather created Scawthorne Nutrition, a company designed to offer independent nutrition advising to farms wanting to improve feed costs and milk yield. Through this, nutrition consulting has been provided to many farms and organizations globally, such as Dubai, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, Vietnam, and Canada. Daniel has volunteered with Farmers Helping Farmers by helping small dairy farms in Kenya improve milk production and cow health. When Daniel is not working with farms, cows, and fellow nutritionists, soccer coaching, personal fitness, cooking, surfing, and seeing new places are favorite things to do. He has 3 amazing children, Logan, Alexandra, Zara, and a very supportive wife, Heather. Register to join us for a 9 a.m. or 5 p.m. Between now and November 11th, the U.S. switches back to standard time from daylight saving time, so we move the webinar forward an hour in the evening by visiting the agmodelsystems.com webpage and looking under the Nutritionist 2021 webinar tab for the proper webinar sign-up button. The webinars are organized and produced by AMTS, USA and Global. Our host in the morning was Dr. Elena Bonfante, AMTS distributor and partner in Dairy Innovations Italia with Dr. Bill Prokop, who also joined us. Our distributor in Turkey, Dr. Huday Kavustran, joined us in the morning webinar as well. In our evening webinar, we were joined by our distributor in China, Dr. Sean Lee of Ansci Tech, and our usual co-host, Paula Torillo of Afina, who hosts the webinar as El Webinar del Nutritionista. She receives support from Rock River Lab in Argentina and is ably assisted by Paula Alanes in her translations. We are especially thankful to generous sponsors who make it possible for us to get great speakers and manage the program. We thank our gold sponsors, Arm & Hammer, Animal and Food Production, #ScienceHearted, the Canola Council of Canada. Learn more about feeding canola at canolamazing.com, Adina, experts in animal nutrition with expertise in plant bioactives, and Proteca, transforming the future of farm animal health. Our silver sponsors are Ajinomoto, superior nutrition through amino acids, and Virtus, both of whom have sponsored us from the start. Also, the Forage Analysis Labs of Dairyland Laboratories and Dairy One, both with affiliates around the world. Adiseo, ruminant nutrition solutions to ensure animal performance, and micronutrients, feeding the future. Our bronze sponsors are Amino Max, Purdue Agribusiness, Origination Inc., Phileo, Balchem, and the Milk Group. Each of these companies support education and research worldwide. We hope that you consider them in your future formulation decisions. Now we will add on the questions from the morning and the afternoon sessions.
Without anything else, let me say a couple things.
Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, hi, Elena. Hi, Hudai. Hi, Sean. I'd say hi to Bill, but he's here in the office. So, I was going to add a little segment after I did the rest of the recording, and then I decided I'll just say it live. Anyone that has walked cows with me knows this, but everyone that hasn't walked cows with me, I get asked a lot about what do I look for? What do I look at? What are my steps that I take when I'm walking through a group of animals? And I always tell people I really can't explain it to you. I've tried. It's just one of those things that my brain just will switch so many different directions walking through a group. It'll be I'll be glancing at body condition score. I'll be looking at how does the coat look, how do the eyes look, how are they eating, how do their feet look, how do the stalls look in terms of bedding, cleanliness. If it's a dry lot, how dry is it? Really a dry lot? Is it soft? Is it compacted? Is it, are there things with the physical structure that are things that are suddenly protruding that could cause an injury. I just kind of look at the whole environment as well as looking at the animals, and it's really hard for me to really describe what I'm looking at when I'm going through it with people. I guess I take the approach of I guess the best way to describe it is I take the approach that I'm the owner of the facility as I'm walking through it and seeing what's actually there. How does the overall picture look to me? I can't say that I'm looking for that I'm counting how many animals are ruminating or how many animals are lying down. It's some of those things are so dependent on the time of day, in relation to feeding and everything that it's I just go and see just try and get an overall feel for what the animals are telling me, and then I'll spend a fair amount of time in the feed bunk in the feed alley, just watching how they eat. They can tell me so much about so many things that are going on by watching their eating behavior. So it's, and I always end up apologizing to people about that I can't really tell you I do steps A, B, C, D, because I don't. There's my brain's weird. Anyone that knows me will vouch for that. And I'm looking at a whole picture.
I'll just add to that we did have, years ago in our blogs, there was a blog that Tom did on his questions that he asked when he is looking at a heifer facility. So it might be of value to go back to that and see what he had to say. I certainly appreciate, we've had so many of these farm tours at this point. The fact that this is a working and not necessarily perfect farm. So we, you know, when we were up at the Minor Institute, fantastic facility, but it's research. And so things that need fixing probably do get fixed or are different than this facility where you work within what you have and fix what is profitable to fix, I guess would be sort of a little summary from my aspect. Bill and Elena and Hudai and Sean, we all certainly want to hear from you. I'm waiting to see any questions that might come in from our audience. Any comments or thoughts that you all would like to share from your perspective. And we'll start off with Elena. Beauty and youth before all others.
Thank you, Marianne,
You're welcome.
for the opportunity to speak first. So thank you, Tom. This was great, and also the audio was fantastic this time.
New microphones.
Okay, tell me.
Yeah, hardwired microphones that actually, and then clipped my collar.
Oh, okay. Nice to know.
Yeah.
So I completely agree with you of what you said right now, that you have to experience, the farm visits and see different things in order to understand and to see the whole picture, I would say. And I have a question about the nutrition, actually, and what you said about the fact that it's very difficult to formulate a unique diet, only one diet for the whole, growing period, because, as you said, the the pregnant heifers get very efficient to transform energy and put that as a body condition. So if you have a herd with only silages, since the lactic acid is the main problem, let's say. So so can you summarize what will be the strategy in order to avoid them to get fat?
Yeah. Dilution is the solution. There's no other way around it. It's really when I stumbled upon this lactic acid relationship. Oh God, probably in like 2003. It was something that I happened to see on farm one year, and then I got talking about it with Danny Fox. And at the same time, there was another conversation floating around that all tied into it. So we saw one year, historically, we used to do at McMahon's grass silage first before alfalfa, and really made cow quality grass silage. And it was awesome. It's great for cows. And we saw always we're having struggles with heifers being overconditioned. Then the next year we had 1 year we had a wet spring where we ended up not being able to do grass until after we did alfalfa, until after we did alfalfa. And the heifers body condition score was phenomenal. It was right where we wanted it. The growth was great, and really didn't think about it. The next year, we went back to doing grass the way that we normally did. And within 30 days, we started to see heifer body condition score start going way up. And that got me really curious as to what the hell was different. Why did this happen? And at the same time, there was a large farm in central New York that was asking the question, we're feeding our heifers all reed canary grass. It's awesome stuff. It's like 18% protein, and they get fat. As soon as I started talking about that with Danny, he remembered a grad student that he had that they did a project. It was with Holstein steers, and the whole idea was for these farmer feeders was to add urea to corn silage at harvest to try and increase the crude protein of the corn silage to reduce feeding costs of the steers. And he went and he pulled the dissertation out, and we're going through it because he remembered that they saw that the urea treatment corn silage fed heifers had more body fat. At the end of it, the difference in treatment was basically at the diet level, they were 4 versus 5% lactic acid in the diet. And there was a 2% difference in a 2-unit difference in empty body fat, 26 versus 28%. He then told me that when he came back to Cornell in the early 80s, he and Sniffen had talked about that and had the same idea about adding urea to corn silage for heifers. And so they did it again with Holstein heifers. That data was never published. And all he could remember was every Monday, Charlie coming into his office and proclaiming in typical Charlie Sniffen fashion that he could not believe how fat those heifers were on the urea-treated corn silage. And we started discussing more about this interaction with lactic acid. And at the time, I really couldn't find anything in the literature. And there still isn't a lot in the literature. But I actually went back to some of the human exercise physiology literature, and it's known that lactic or lactate, when we're talking about in humans, and there's the post-exercise lactate accumulation in muscles, that's actually going back into the Krebs cycle and being utilized as a true energy source. And in terms of ruminants, that lactic, about a third of the carbon skeletons in intermuscular. One of the fat pools, about a third of the carbon skeletons is purely from lactate. So as we feed these higher lactic acid diets, we're feeding that. It's short-circuiting the entire metabolic pathways, and it's not triggering any insulin responses. It's not triggering anything. It's going directly in and primarily being used for adipose metabolism. And it doesn't take a whole lot. The little bit of data out there shows, going from 4% to 5% is enough to do it. And unfortunately, when we get into a lot of these silages, and this is where a lot of people, Danny was shocked when we went through this, especially if people are doing a good job with harvest and packing, and if they're using inoculants, a lot of these corn silages, we may be seeing 6, 7, 8% lactic. Some of these grass silages around the world, hell, I've seen some of them in the upper teens, low 20s on lactic. And there's an interaction there with maturity of the plant. So the like with grasses, if we have an immature plant, that fiber is a little bit more fermentable, even in storage, all of the sugars that are there. So we get this really, really good fermentation. We get this really good stuff for cows. It's just really high in lactic acid, and we're causing fat heifers. So if we're dealing with these silos that are full of silage right now, and we know that they're high in lactic, the only thing we can do is dilute it, and then that's going to be straw, hay, whatever, byproducts, because it's not possible to feed extra protein to overcome it, because it's not being treated as a glucose source or as a prop source that's going to go through go through what we would consider ideal metabolism for growth.
Yeah, got it. And so would you suggest to harvest, grass, more mature grass, and reserve that just for Heifers, if that is possible?
I love doing that. And it could be grass, it could be triticale, it could be wheat, barley silage, I don't care what. But if we do a forage source, this is an area where, you know, we have pushed so hard for 40 years in this industry to get producers to make better quality silage, better quality forages.
Mm-hmm.
And we've achieved that. And we've always framed that in the discussions of for the cows. Well, that's great for the cows, but that isn't the appropriate feed for heifers and even somewhat the dry cows. I mean, that's why dry cows, how much straw do we feed to dry cows? Because we don't have other low quality, you know, high fiber sources of feed forages to use. So we have to go to something that is high NDF, low quality, you know, decent, you know, that they will eat and will do everything we want it to do. So if possible, and it's a management issue on farm of being able to have that extra storage space and then be able to harvest the appropriate crop and at the appropriate quality for the different animal types. And not everyone can do that. But if possible, absolutely. You know, you look at my close-up diets, you know, where a lot of people are feeding 3, 4, 5 kilos of straw, I'm feeding like 1, maybe 2, because I have all this grass silage that's basically doing a very similar thing as being high straw.
Mm-hmm.
It's allocation. It's planning and allocation.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Elena. A question while we're discussing the lactic acid. What is your marker for lactic acid? How many grams per kilogram dry matter intake?
So let's see. I want to be below 4% dry matter of lactic acid in the diet.
Thank you. Barring other questions coming in, I guess I would ask Hudai, do you have any questions that you would like to questions or comments you would like to direct to Tom?
Okay, thank you, Marian.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. So maybe we are using some barley and veg together. You know, we grow the barley and veg together.
Yep.
Maybe 1/3 veg and 2/3 is barley. So I think this is a good combination for the heifers and the dry cows. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to come down to harvesting at the right stage of maturity, and the nice thing with that combination is if they're letting the veg go a little bit more, the barley is going to be a little bit more mature, so we're going to have something that's can have a nice level of fermentable NDF in it. That and with that veg, it's not going to produce as much lactic acid during fermentation. So yeah, it can be a great combination.
Okay, thank you. So I have a question, you know, about the feeding the cows with milk. So you wean the cows about 50 or 60 days, something like that. That is what I understood from your.
Yeah, we start at day 49 and wean them down over the next 10 days.
So how many liters or kilograms of milk do you feed during that period?
We just switched this Hudai to where we step it down on a daily basis. I want to say we're stepping it down 2 liters a day. So let's see. On day 49, they're going to be getting 10 liters a day total. So 4 in the morning, 2 at noon, 4 at night. Then they'll remove the noon feeding, and then remove 2 liters from the night feeding, then remove the other 2 liters from the night feeding, and then remove 2 from the morning, and then they'll stay on that for a couple days, and then remove the last milk feeding.
Okay. So I think you are feeding the same ration. I don't know if I got wrong or you use the same ration for the 3 groups of heifers. The one is the transition about 6 to 7, no, between the 8 or 10 months, and early breeding, and also the bred heifers. Are you using the same ration?
I am. So I basically have, so the heifers from weaning until 6 months are on the high cow TMR.
Oh, this is a good idea, yeah.
And then from 7 months until about 6 weeks pre-calving, they're all on the same diet.
That's good. Okay, thank you, Tom.
Yep. And you know, Marianne, can I share my screen?
Yeah, let me stop sharing. That'll be better because then people won't keep seeing gray.
Okay. So I just want to show one graph. I put this together a couple years ago. And so I took by month and what body weights would be, and I think I did this for like 900 grams a gain, and whatever predicted dry matter intake was, and calculated both the ME concentration per kilo of intake and the MP concentration per kilo of intake for heifers, and then I threw some cows in there just to give an index. And if we look at these 2-month-old heifers, you know, you see that there's nothing comparable to them, even the 3-month-old heifers. There's nothing comparable to them at any other stage of their life. We get into these 4, 5, and 6-month-old heifers here. You can see that gets us basically the same energy and protein concentrations required as cows giving, you know, 40, 50 liters, you know, 100, 110 pounds of milk. And it starts to come down, and we get into this around breeding and these early bred heifers, and their requirements are so low, which is fine. The problem is what I see around the world when we get into formulating bred heifer diets. People will formulate for the average bred heifer, 140 days pregnant. Well, that's in here. So they're formulating for these really low levels. But then when we start getting into that last trimester, we start to see their requirements, especially their protein requirements, start to increase rapidly. And in that month prior to calving, their requirements are extremely high. You know, we're talking greater than 50 liters of milk comparable. So without feeding that adequate levels of protein in this stage, we end up with underweight heifers. They will get fat. They can get fat. And if we were to run them across scales, it would still look like they were gaining the appropriate amount. But, you know, 1.5 pounds, 650, 700 grams of that is actually the growth of the pregnancy. So we're actually shortchanging these heifers. So when I do these diets, I'm actually I'm formulating, in this case, with it being the same diet from about 7 months on, I'm formulating them on the 7, 8-month-old heifers, knowing that I'm going to be overfeeding, especially protein, for several months. And then late in that last trimester, we come back closer to that's actually meeting their requirements. If I was doing just if I had an open heifer diet and a bred heifer diet, my bred heifer diet would still be fed at these higher levels of protein, just so that I can maintain that target average daily gain to get the right weight at calving. Versus, anyone who's formulating bred heifer diets and using 120, 140-day pregnancy to set their requirements, you are shortchanging those heifers in that last trimester and sacrificing weight at calving. Again, like I said, if it, in an ideal, if we were large enough where I could make 2 full loads of TMR, and then I would probably have an early and a late pregnant diet. But with the size that we are, it's easier just to do one diet aimed specifically at those later pregnant heifers.
Thank you, Hudai. If you have more
Thank you.
questions, we'll come back. I want to get Bill Prokop, if he hasn't already left. I know he had to go off. So, Bill, do you have comments or some questions you'd like to ask?
Sure. Yeah, I'm still here. So I really appreciate your insight in terms of the mentoring process when walking pens. And we could argue about how successful I have been as a mentor. But anyway, the one thing I've learned and I use, I think, to be beneficial, and I'll share it, is I definitely try to use a systems approach and understand the life cycle of each stage of the operation and look at each of those subsystems, like the wet calves, 0 to weaning, as an enterprise, and understand what the ideal enterprise output would be, as if they were going to sell that product to the next system within the dairy. And would they buy those animals, or would they source them elsewhere? And just from the standpoint of, to reinforce to all the players on the dairy how interactive and interdependent they are, and understand that each one of these subsystems makes up the whole. And I think you alluded to this beautifully when you brought the reality in of what does it truly cost to build a ration? Well, sure, the model tells us what the cost per head per day is, but we're not factoring in the opportunity costs of the equipment and the labor and all the other things that have to be considered, especially when you make choices that someone would challenge and say, well, why are you feeding such an expensive diet to heifers that don't need it? Because it's actually a more effective and ultimately more cost-effective solution to do that than to build 2 separate diets. It's going to cost you more.
Yeah.
And so I really do appreciate that approach. And the only question I had is, if you were going to throw out a guideline for a 30-hour digestibility on NDF for grasses or even legumes that you would want to have for the heifers, for the fill factor, the UNDF considerations, all that, do you have a number in mind?
Bill, I don't. For these heifer diets like that, I'm primarily have set a minimum for what my Forage NDF is as a % of body weight.
Okay.
And I'll let that float between 1.1 and 1.4. I've done diets less than 1. You can make them, they can work, but they get tricky.
Yeah.
Beyond that, these grasses, when we get into this stage of maturity, I'm not even going to guess. I'd have to go back and look at what a bunch of samples have been running in terms of these NDF digestibilities.
Why I'm going there is, if to quantitate this for the purpose of harvest. Now, I know you could do it by stage of maturity of the plant, but let's say you want to do scissor cuttings to actually get a handle on where we're at, right? And I can see this question coming up, like, what kind of NDFDs are we looking for at, say, 30 hours or whatever it is? But yeah, I appreciate that. The other question then is the lactic acid. The model gives it assigns it an energy value, obviously, as a carbohydrate fraction. But my impression is it's not being assigned the metabolic impact that it actually has. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. It's set up within the Cornell model to provide a little bit of microbial yield. It's based off of some of Jim Russell's work that showed that we get about half the ATP from the fermentation of lactic than glucose.
Right.
And it's just going into the overall energy pool. We don't have a post-absorption metabolism model, which is the level that we would have to go at to be able to do all of that.
Okay, copy. And I do have to run, but I'll ask one more question. I really like the exercise lot principle that you have on your heifers. As with human physiology, we know that exercise tends to work, obviously, to build muscle and bone. And so the stature benefit of having exercise, especially for the developing heifer, or at least pens, as opposed to confinement, you think that contributes to some of the success story, or you think it's overstated?
No, I think it's critical. Hell, go walk through a groups of freestyle heifers, and they don't look the same.
Right.
And I think that is, and all we got to do is go into any school in the U.S. And look at the physical activity differences between kids and
Right.
and everything that goes along with that.
Yeah, agreed. And why dry lot dairies oftentimes present with some of the, depending upon the heat stress regulation, mitigation, but why dry lot dairies, I think their animals tend to present to be the most robust in many ways. And it's because they've got all that room and off concrete.
I agree. We need to come up with a flooring solution that's as close to dirt as possible. But if we try to do anything like that in the northern hemisphere, or the northern part of the U.S., or any place where we actually have water, suddenly environmental regulations want us to cover it, concrete it, and cover it.
Yeah, I hear you. No, I understand. I was going to go there, but you brought it up. So that's the next. Yeah, the yellow helicopter flies in, and you're in trouble. Yeah, I know. So, all right. Well, it was great. Thanks, Tom. I do
Thanks,
have to
Bill.
cut. So, all right.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Ciao, everybody.
All right, before we go to some other questions or any other comments, I have a question. In high TMR diets, would less than 7% would be less than 7% lactic, or greater, sorry, than 7% lactic acid. It is at 6 months of age, you need to reduce to less than 4%. Is that correct?
Oh no, I look at that right from I work to keep the lactic less than 4% across all heifer ages.
All right, thanks. I have a question on how will you integrate are there different requirements for those jerseys? Bringing in 120 is going to be a significant enough group, or no? Well, what are their requirements and what are your targets for them?
It's the same, so instead of trying to target a kilo, I'll have to sit down and figure out what target breeding weights would be. But all the work over the last 10-15 years has basically shown that in terms of energy and protein requirements, there's such minimal difference between jerseys and Holsteins that it's we can't even measure it.
Okay. All right. Unless I get more questions, Elena, Di, do you have additional questions or comments you'd like to make? And Sean was with us, but I think he was left.
Sean left. Yeah.
So just the last one, Tom. For amino acid optimization, do you consider to use it on the growing period? When is better to invest in that? In which window?
I think definitely in that first 4 or 5 months of life. And definitely in calf starters on that calf phase. You know, you look at the work that Rodrigo did for his PhD with Van Amberg, and there was clear benefits of supplemental methionine in calf starters. And I also think that, especially during that young phase, if we think about when we would typically see most diseases, respiratory diseases, anything that will help with immune function during those periods, I think definitely warrants higher planes of nutrition than are commonly used.
Thanks.
Hudai?
No, thank you.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you everyone who joined us and asked questions and just continued to listen. We will repeat this again tonight with a different audience, or if you want to join again, there's nothing stopping you. And next month we'll have, again, to remind you, we'll have Daniel Scotthorne, and then we will finish up with Sam Fessenden in December. He's going to talk to us a bit about feeding in robotic dairies and his experiences there. So, all right, everybody, thank you for joining us, and we will say goodbye this morning. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Stay
Thank you
safe.
very much.
And hopefully we'll be able to start traveling soon. And Marianne, it's so awesome to hear a baby crying in the background on you.
He's ready for his morning nap. That is, for those of you still listening, that's my grandson, and I'm a little bit on grandmother duty, and he is the cutest thing ever. So,
Nice.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Tom, Paula, welcome, and let's see. Paula, do you want me to lead off with some questions, or do you have some that you want to start asking? I have a few.
Hi.
Hey,
You
Paula.
can start if you want.
Pardon me?
She
You
said
can
you can
start if you
start.
want.
Okay. All right. Terrific. I'm going to start with a question from Brittany Sherman. She asked, Tom, can you go over your reasons again for not limit feeding heifers?
Okay. There's very, very few farms I have seen anywhere in the world that can limit feed heifers correctly. Partially because we have many heifer pens that are overcrowded. And if we're going to do any type of limit feeding, we need to ensure that we have to be less than 100% stocking rate at the feed rail. And even with that, if the pens are not uniform in size of animal, those smaller animals are going to get bullied out of the way and perform even less, unless they're jerseys, and then they'll push all the Holsteins out of the way. The management of it is really tough, and there's some really neat data. I think the best part of it to me is some data that I saw several years ago. It was just an abstract form. It was out of Brazil, that showed that if they did it some on sorting, and there was some other data that showed that it showed that both sorting and slug feeding were learned behaviors, and they're lifetime learned. I know that for sure with sorting. I don't think there's been as much work with that as on dairy animals, or on limit feeding, but definitely with sorting. That's a lifetime learned behavior, and given an opportunity, those animals will revert back to those learned behaviors. I would, I know that there's a lot of discussion about limit feeding. Hell, there was just a paper published about improving the energy efficiency of lactating cows by limit feeding lactating cows. And I cringe when I see things like that, because I the management required to successfully do those types of things is so high that there's very few farms that I think can successfully and consistently achieve the desired outcomes.
Okay, I'm going to ask another question and then see if Paula wants to ask some, and then we'll come back to mine. So this is I'm going to follow up with another one from Brittany. I've got another question from another person, but I'll stick with Brittany's. With the milk cow TMR being a good fit for weaned heifers, how do they do with the silage/moisture levels? She always thought hay was best for weaned heifers, but it's hard to find the best hay to use.
Well, the thing is, if we feed it a silage, that just means that they drink that much less water. Because think about it, if they take a mouthful of hay, of dry hay, that's going to become saturated in the rumen pretty quick. There's absolutely nothing magical about feeding hay to young animals, as long as they came off of a good calf starter and that rumen development has been positive, which is a whole nother story in itself. But with a good transition, these young animals can easily go on silages, as long as the diet's formulated. You know, a lot of these issues like this with silage is bad for young heifers or calves really goes back to some of the component feeding times when people would just feed straight corn silage to heifers, and then you end up with these short little fat things that just look terrible. But if it's appropriately balanced, there is no problems with them at all. And the whole concern, I've heard the concern about, oh, it's so acidic and yada yada yada. No, because once it's, again, if the rumen development is coming along correctly, then their ability, it's ruminal fermentation. Okay, the pH of the TMR might be 4, but when they take a bite and everything's working right in the rumen, it's going to come up into the 6s really quick. The big thing is it's that moisture, it's just a displacement of where they get the water from. I don't know of any data that would say that they would actually eat less than if on a TMR than if it was a completely dry-based diet.
All right, thank you. Paula, are you ready with a few questions?
Yes, I'm ready.
Great, go ahead.
The first question is about the TMR composition,
Okay.
the high TMR.
Yep. What about it?
The composition.
Yeah, what is it?
Well, the best way to do that is,
I'll let you share.
yeah, let me just bring up the I'll bring up the diet and show it.
Remember, we cannot watch it.
All right. That's right, because it'll be so small. Yeah, that's right. You can't watch it because of the different platform.
Yes.
All right. It is, let me bring it up. Metric. And go to the right diet. That'll help. High carb diet active. put it on a percentage basis. So it is on a dry matter basis, rounding a little bit here, 38% corn silage, 20% alfalfa silage, 9.5% of a chocolate candy cookie byproduct, 11% ground wheat, 5.9% of a bypass soya product, and 15.5% of a protein slash mineral vitamin, fat, everything else blend. It is right now, because of the alfalfa silage that we're feeding, it's a little higher in protein than I'd like. Regardless, it's designed to it's formulated to support 47 kilos of milk.
Okay, perfect. I think you answered the question.
Okay.
Okay. The next question is about the body condition score of the Heifers.
Mm-hmm.
Which are your goals in the different ages?
Oh, okay. Well, this one I will share because I love this slide. Let me find it.
Maybe I can make a screenshot and
Yeah.
and send
Oh,
it.
that's right. Damn it, I forgot.
Tom, if you can put it up, I'll see if I can make a screenshot and send it real quick to Paula.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Oh no, I can't do that. I need to do this. Okay. To me, there's if you look at how much variability there is in body condition scoring, I'm always hesitant to say a number. You look at this data, there's really only 3 scores, too thin, too fat, just right. So I will always run the heifers just right, and maybe I actually prefer them to be a little on the thin side, if anything. I don't like, let's see, I'll put a number on it. Anything over 3.5 to me is too fat.
Okay.
I'm getting there, Paula.
Okay.
Tom, I have a question of body condition scoring while I'm doing this, if I can.
Go ahead.
Somehow multitask. Actually, you might be able to see it in Weebin's question. There is a body condition score.
Oh, Q&A. Where do you put the
And reread that question, please, because you know I'm multitasking.
Oh, it's a multiple part question. All right. So
We'll only answer the body condition score, and then I'll tackle those others.
All right. How many times do I body condition score the heifers, and what is your target for different phases? Okay. I All right. I guess I need to answer that part of the question as people that have walked cows with me know how I walk cows. Everyone else, I have to explain a couple things. My brain is, yes.
Tom, while you get going on this one, I'm going to just add that Paula has a similar question, but it's geared towards weight, not necessarily body condition score. So if you can tackle both of those.
Okay. My brain is weird. The way my brain works, it would keep people busy for multiple PhD students. When I'm walking through a group of animals, I can't really say that I'm body condition scoring all this animal, that animal, this animal, or that I'm doing locomotion scores or counting rumination, number of cows ruminating, or number of animals lying down. I look at the whole thing. I look at trends in body condition score. I'll look at body conditions. You know, if I'm walking heifers, it'll be weaning 6 months, first breeding, and then about 3 to 4 weeks pre-calving. And that's just the way that really the animals are grouped. I'll walk through and just look at trends. Are we gaining? Are we losing? Are we seeing a slow trend towards increasing? At the same time, I'm looking at hocks. I'm looking at the stalls. I'm looking at the physical plant to see if there's damage that could injure animals. Looking at I see everything, but not in what most people would consider a logical way. I look at, and I'll go back to this, when I look at body condition scoring, I'm looking at trends at different stages, and I'm looking at this simplified, she's too thin, they're too fat, they're just right. And it's just the way that I see the animals. I can't really explain it. So I guess I'm looking at, to kind of answer your question, Weaven, is I'm looking at, anytime I'm walking through a group of animals, I'm actually looking at the body condition score trends. And I might not write down specific animals. I might not write down specific scores. I'll write down notes to myself of, seeing an increase in body condition score in this pen, or seldom see a loss in body condition score with heifers, so that's not really an issue, but it's possible. And I'm just looking at those trends through the growth cycle, and then going back thinking about the diets and what could potentially be causing some of those trends that we're seeing. I do it the same way with cows. Even with cows, I only really look at body condition score at like 2 or 3 stages of the lactation cycle. And again, it's looking for those trends.
Okay. Paula, before you start on another question, I have a question here, and then I'll let you go, and then I'll come back to some of Weaven's questions.
Okay.
Are you going to give me bills?
Yes.
All right.
I love the way Bill wrote it too.
All right.
All right. So, Tom, can you get 30 plus pounds dry matter intake in large heifers as the model predicts? Ha ha. Where do you put the ME and MP allowable gains for larger 190 days carried calf plus heifers?
Yeah. All right. So let's do the intake one first, because that is, it's funny that you bring that up, Bill, because I've had that conversation quite a bit over the last couple of years, and actually sat down with Van Amberg to discuss some of these things as well, because some of the numbers that we hear from people are really concerning as to what level of intakes that they see or what they expect. And what's worse is the intake predictions that are in the model, that are from the NRC for intakes. They pretty much are let's see, scary is the best way to put it, because they are not continuous. If you follow through some of the intake numbers, especially we get into close-up heifers and such, they start getting at, let's see, the equation from the 2001 NRC for anyone over 210 days pregnant drops the predicted intake for heifers to 1.7% of body weight, and then corrected for we correct for environmental conditions. But they also do dry cows at 1.9% of body weight. And when I went back and looked at some of the data that went into those equations, it really was aimed more at.
Sorry, I want to see this screen so that I can take pictures.
Oh, okay. It is really aimed at it was a small data set for the heifers, and they were fed the types of diets that we would expect the heifers to get fat on.
Hey, Tom, that's worse.
What's worse?
Oh, for some reason, we're only seeing, or at least I'm only seeing a bar.
Oh, well, hold on a second.
Sorry about that. I'm trying to capture a screenshot for Paula.
Yeah, that should work.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And I think those intakes that we see is really dependent on the diet. I can, on some of these heifers, we can be looking at, let's see, on pen 60, when they are in the winter inside eating just TMR, that 31 pounds of intake on those later bred heifers is pretty common. But if we were to knock off, let's say 10% for it being really cold, 27, 28 pounds is what I'm pretty used to seeing. Again, though, that's with these high fill type diets where letting them eat as much as they want. I think, Bill, it goes back to some of the same things that we see we could even say the same thing with transition cows, where these close-up dry cows that are fed really heavy corn silage diets, intakes from what I've seen have always been quite a bit lower than when we get into the more calorie controlled, moderate to high fill type situations. So I think it really depends on the diet of what we're offering these animals at the various stages. And the new NRC that's going to be coming out sure doesn't give any guidance on this, especially with close-up heifers, or just heifers in general. They're going to do, see, for close-up heifers, they're just taking 15% off of whatever the predicted intake is for dry cows, claiming that there was no data. So that's a huge hole in our knowledge base. And I'd like to say that, version 7 of the model will give us some guidance on that, but hell if I know, because that really hasn't been tested with heifers, especially on the room and fill side. I think there's there's a lot left to learn there. And even if we look at the equations that we use as a base are from the 96 beef NRC, which if we trace those equations all the way back, they go back to 1978 public NRC publication on predicting voluntary feed intake of domesticated animals. Those of you that are used to any of that stuff, it's the yellow book. And Danny was actually the chair of that committee. When the beef NRC was looking at revamping equations, Galen had a grad student or a couple grad students that went through and did a meta-analysis and developed some new equations. And the predictability of the new equations they developed versus those old equations was very similar. And the accuracy, the precision of the equations, of the new equations they developed, was actually lower than the precision of those equations from the 70s. I think there's still a lot we've got to figure out with predicting intake on these heifers, because I think it's a much more multifactorial system than we are taking into account now. The other part of Bill's question is, where do I set ME and MP allowable gains? Haha. And that's why I have this spreadsheet tab up. Sorry, I know Marianne's going to send this to you, Paula.
Already did.
Okay, cool. So I put this together.
I'm showing this right
cool.
now.
Perfect.
Good. I put this together 2 years ago. I started thinking about this actually when I was in China doing some sessions. And I came home and I expanded it, starting right from 2 months of age all the way up through calving, assuming a 24-month age of first calving, and then included some dry cows and then some lactating cows. And for the heifers, I think I assumed 900 grams average daily gain. So then taking whatever the predicted intake was and then the total energy requirement and the total MP requirement, I put all of these on a concentration, so ME per kilo of dry matter intake and MP per kilo of dry matter intake. And it really shows some awesome things. These young heifers, the first 3-4 months of life, I mean, the first 3 months, hell, we can't feed them enough to meet what they actually require to gain as much as we would like. You compare them to a mature cow given 50 kilos of milk, on a protein basis, that cow requires about 120 grams of MP. Yet that young heifer is requiring 180. Massive protein requirements on these young animals. And we can see that stays, and it was really cool to see this, that even up around 6 months, like, hey, look at that. That was accidental. We're pretty close to those MP requirements, especially compared to those cows given 35, 40, 50 kilos of milk. And then it goes down tremendously as they grow. And we get into that puberty phase and then that early bred heifer phase. And, here, so 16, 17, 18 months of age, mid-pregnancy, that is the lowest requirements time in that heifer's life. And if people actually formulate diets for like 140 days pregnant, they're just meeting protein requirements, they're going to lose body weight at calving, because once that pregnancy requirement really gets to be important, and that's where that 190-day pregnancy comes in, suddenly there's about 1.5 pounds, about 650 grams of average daily gain equivalent that is going to the conceptus. And that is a very protein rich requirement. And you can see that we get into this last trimester, and these animals actually, their protein requirements start coming up tremendously. And then that last month pre-calving, because of mammogenesis and that continued growth, we can't, their requirements are actually comparable to that cow given 120 pounds milk. So when I'm formulating diets for these animals, if I'm doing a bred heifer diet, I'm actually formulating around these heifers. I'm saying, okay, the pen's 190 days, 195 days pregnant, knowing I'm going to be overfeeding protein in the early bred heifers, but I'm not going to give up that protein allowable gain in that last trimester. And we actually have in the program, Bill, two outputs for gain, two sets. So we have ME and MP allowable, which is the heifer herself, and then we also have ME and MP allowable plus conceptus. And well, there's what the growth curve for, see, an 1,800 pound mature cow. So that's the bred heifer growth rate of, and you can see here at 190 days pregnant, sorry, Paula, that the shape of that growth curve changes tremendously because of that conceptus. And let's see, so with conceptus, I actually got those tables worked out. Did I just do this graphs? Yeah, okay. Bred heifers by mature weight. So there we go. If we do 1,700 pound heifer, mature weight, that pregnant heifer herself has to average 1.64 pounds a day. So call it 800 grams during pregnancy. And in that last trimester, including the weight of the conceptus, they're going to be gaining somewhere around 3.2 pounds a day. So 1.6, 1.5 kilos a day. So I'm actually looking at both of those, Bill, and making sure that my MP allowable gain is never lower than my ME allowable gain, and then I'm making, and the way we've got it structured such that the MP allowable gain will be calculated after the pregnancy requirements, so I can still target that 800 grams. But if I was looking at it in other systems, I'd probably for that last trimester be targeting probably closer to that 3 pounds a day, ensuring that I have adequate MP there for that conceptus and the heifer herself.
All right. I know Paula has a lot of questions at her end, but I just sent her about 3 emails that she probably has to process and get put up. So I'm going to ask another of Weebin's questions. And I think you tackled the question he had about ME and MP. And let's do a little bit about the young calves and then get to a bunch of questions from Paula. So we've been asked, where do you put the newborn calves right after birth in your coldest days, like we had in February when you shot last time?
Okay, so what we will do is at birth, they will go into a warming hutch, which is just a hutch with a infrared light in it, until for the first 18 to 24 hours, at least till they're dry. If they're dry and they're standing and they've got their colostrum and and they look perky and everything, great. They are then eligible to be moved into a hutch and that hutch is bedded with it's deep sawdust, and during the winter they may use some straw as a base for the calf to snuggle down into. And that's about it. And as long as they're out of the wind, they do well. We've actually found if they stay in that warming hutch too long, if they stay in that warming hutch 36, 48 hours, they actually make the transition harder to that to the regular hutch.
Okay. I think Paula wants to get in some questions next.
Oh yeah, I have many, but I don't want you to show anymore.
I won't. I'll stop.
Poor
Your
Slot.
screen.
I'll sit
please.
on my hands. I'll sit on my hands.
Okay, so I'm asking question number 6. Which is your opinion regarding the use of waste milk in baby calves? Sometimes total solids are as low as 6.5 or 6.7. And how much milk would you give them in that case?
Paula, we have a really good program that handles that. I just want to put a plug in for Mix-a-Lot.
Oh my. Okay. So you hit on a key component there. Waste milk is not waste milk. And so we feed waste milk. But it's selective waste milk. It is only from cows that are, let's say that they had foot wart and they were being given penicillin, or they had some arthritis and they were being given penicillin. But the treatment has ended and they're just waiting for the withdrawal time to go back into the milking strength. We never use actively treated cows. We never use especially cows that are actively being treated for mastitis. So our waste milk is very selective, and we actually use probably more milk, more saleable milk than waste milk. I have not gotten into the farm yet on measuring solids. That will be coming. This is a multi-stage, multi-step process. I'm just excited that we're going to be getting a pasteurizer here. Depending on the dairy economy, could be 6 months, could be 6 years. But it's part of the capital plan now. If I was dealing with some of that waste milk that was that low in solids, boy, the only thing you can do is add milk replacer to bring solids content up, because to try and feed, hell, to get the same, let's think of it this way. Instead of solids content and talking about that, let's flip that around and say, what's the dry matter intake on these calves? And we know with cows that if we were feeding always the same amount on an as-is basis, and we had a very wet ingredient in the TMR, so today they'd be offered 20 kilos of dry matter. Tomorrow it could be 25 kilos of dry matter. The next day it could be 15. We know what that type of variability in intake does to milk production. It's going to do the same damn thing in terms of growth of the calf, and even worse, the health of the calf. I would be extremely hesitant to be saying, well, we're only 6% solid, so we're going to feed twice as much liquid. I don't think they can handle that huge shift in as fed amount Rather, with these young calves, we should really be trying to get a stable amount of dry matter intake into them. And if that means we have to increase or decrease the amount of milk replacer that we put in with this waste milk, then that's the best thing that we can do for the consistency of intake and growth and health of the calf.
Tom, before Paula gets her next question in, address the question of cold stress with nutrition that we've been asked. How do you manage that with your solids or with your feeding frequency?
So okay. So at McMahon's, for the longest time, we only fed twice a day, and I've been pushing to increase or to add an additional feeding because of the cold stress. When we put together the calf model that's within AMTS, I actually, it's a little bit based on the NRC calf model in terms of the cold stress adjustment, but we also included heat stress adjustment too, which the NRC doesn't. And when I ran those calculations, it showed that we were giving up average daily gain due to cold stress. And the good thing is at the farm, we have scales. So we could actually go through the records and look at what happened to weaning, not necessarily weaning weights, what happened to average daily gain at different times of the year. And we clearly saw that during the cold and during the heat, we lost average daily gain. And it worked out just that it was, well, if we feed 2 liters additional at noon, that provides adequate nutrients to overcome that loss. The farm tried it for winter, and as we approached spring, one of the owners said, I don't think I'm going to stop this. And I just started laughing. And I'm like, I knew that we would have this discussion because we saw this consistently higher average daily gain. And that third feeding has been held in place ever since. And we're probably 6 or 7 years into that now. But that is really having the data to show the impact of cold stress on average daily gain in those calves was key. But even then, to be able to show within the model what the energy cost due to cold stress was doing, it was very clear.
Cool. Paula, go.
Okay. I'm asking for how long, let me see, how long does it take to transition the calves from the starter to the TMR that you mentioned in the presentation, but how long does it take?
Sure. So now right now things are a little, heifer populations are backed up. So what we do in normal stocking rate, okay, is...
I am sorry, I'm trying to mute myself and I'm writing in the screen.
Was that you, Paula? I thought you were going to yell at Tom for starting to do something with another slide.
No, I'm not even facing my computer. Okay, so
there it is.
Crap. Now I lost my train of thought. Thanks. Holy crap.
It
Oh,
was,
transition. There we go. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So we only use a calf starter. We don't use a grower grain. So after weaning, they will stay and just receive in the small groups of 3. They'll stay and just get the calf starter for another week. And then they'll go to a group of 10 or 13 and they will get the calf starter alone for another week. Then when they move to the next pen, they'll be offered the TMR with the calf starter top dressed for a week. After that, they're fully on the TMR. Are they perfectly
Great.
transitioned at that time? Probably not. I do see if we do that transition too fast, I actually see it in how the heifers look. Ideally, I guess I would say if we were to do that that top dressing with the TMR for 2 weeks, I think it would make that transition on these calves even smoother. But it works pretty well. Yeah, I would say that 2-week transition is adequate.
Perfect. Very clear. Okay. Talking about the starter, how much starch does it have? And how do you modify the starch content when Heifers age increases? And what about fat and NDF content?
Okay, so in the starter, it is the best way to describe the starter is we have tried to make it as close to a high cow TMR in a pellet. And I challenge people to think about this. Yes, starch and propionate are intimately involved with rumen development, but we're dealing with a young rumen. Why would we feed that any differently than a cow giving 50 kilos of milk? So that means we're talking starch levels, in the low 20s in the calf starter. We add a little bit of soy oil just to help in the manufacturing of the pellet. It's relatively high in sugar, like 8 or 10% sugar. It is really kind of as high in NDF as we can get it, which is really a challenge because the sources of NDF are limited. So we actually use a lot of how would you call it in Argentina? Trigo, it's wheat middlings. So like, we could almost say wheat bran. That would be the closest thing to call it.
Yes, a frechillo de trigo, yes.
And they, with the high level of that, and it really makes a really good hard pellet. And we've actually, if we were to look at some of the work that came out of Cornell, Mike and Rodrigo, their starter was a little different in that they had some flaked corn and some flaked barley in it, but still the general concept was the same, where it was moderate starch, moderate sugar, as much NDF as we can. And they actually showed some beautiful responses by having bypass soya in it, as well as supplemental amino acids in that calf starter. and the performance was really phenomenal on what those calves did on that starter. Because they are. I'm a firm believer in treating that young rumen like a high producing cow. We want good fermentable fiber. We want an adequate but not excessive amount of fermentable starch, a good level of fermentable sugars, and then adequate MP to provide the growth that we want.
Tom, is that where you add Metasmart in?
Yeah, that
Okay.
Rodrigo's data, and if they want, Paula, I can find the slides from Rodrigo that went through what their calf starter formulation was that Cornell developed.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I will find that and get it sent to you because it's a really nice formula.
Tom, would you mind these pictures that we've been taking, putting this together in a little slide set that we can add to the recording?
Have a blast.
Pardon me?
Have a blast.
You got to send me the same slides you sent Paula then.
Be quick and capture them on screen.
I already did that. Yeah. All right. Paula had some more calf questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Could you bring us more details about the liquid feed offer, the plan you make for the little calves and the weaning program specifically?
Okay. So again, we are trying to it is possible, let's put it this way. For the last 10 years, we've talked about everyone's goal should be to double birth weight by 56 days. We have farms doing triple birth weight by 56 days. And that's easily achievable. We're at this farm, we're not tripling, we're probably 2.5 times. And I expect that to go up once we get switched to pasteurized milk. But to do that, what we do is the first 3 feedings are, let's see, the first feeding is colostrum. The next 2 feedings are transition milk. And then they go on 3 times a day feeding. They go until day 21, I think it is. Basically 3 liters of milk in the morning, 2 liters of milk replacer at noon, then 3 liters of milk at night. At day 22, they go to 4 liters in the morning, 2 milk replacer at noon, and 4 at night. At day 49, the noon feeding is removed. At day 50, 2 liters are removed from the night feeding. And that's held for a couple days. And then the next step is to remove the night feeding for a couple days, and then 2 liters removed from the morning feeding for a couple days, and then they're weaned. So it's like 10 days. And we saw a substantial increase in average daily gain during that 2 weeks from when weaning started until we were weighing calves every week for 3 weeks. And we saw that the old style where they would have the noon feeding removed for 2 days and then they would be weaned versus this gradual step down. We saw that those calves that were hard weaned, their average daily gains, for the most part, dropped 50% for 2 weeks. In this step down phase, there was virtually there's very little decrease in average daily gain during the weaning process.
Okay, great. Carlos made a comment about the calves. He saw them a little annoyed, and he is asking, can it be because of the flies? And what do you recommend to lower fly population? Does the cat's tails have something to do with that?
No, we actually, so in our milk replacer during the summer, we actually add a larvicide. And it's cheap. And I know places that actually add it to the calf starter as well. You know, overall cleanliness, that by far, keeping things dry, keeping excess grain cleaned up, all the normal hygiene things, but then using these larvicides really does have a really good positive impact on fly numbers. If Bill Stone is still on this, if you want to make a comment about that, Bill, I greatly would appreciate that. Because that's actually a question I get a fair amount of the time. And in air movement, you know, especially if they're in an indoor situation, air movement with fans clearly does help with getting rid of controlling fly numbers as well. But I'm a big fan of these larvicides. They work. They work really well. We add it in at, you know, about April or March when we're in early spring, and it'll stay in the formulations until this time of year.
Did you ever try the parasitic wasps? Do they work on fly control?
They do, and it's something that I've tried to get to people to look at as well. And you know, it's funny because a lot of those I basically going back to the old IPM days,
Right.
that went through and people were jumping all over it, and then that whole system's just kind of been dropped. I know that you can get the parasitic wasp, and I was actually talking about it recently with someone that we should really look at those.
Yeah, I know we used them on the dairy, and I just didn't know how effective they were.
No, they if they're used on a regular basis, they're good.
Yeah. Paula, keep going. If you have any.
Yes.
Tell
I'm
the
here.
tell the group, Paula, every question's a bottle of wine from Mendoza.
Yeah. Question: ambiflubenzeron? Paula?
Is that the product? Yes, you mentioned.
Yes, the active ingredient. Brand name here in the US is Clarifly.
Okay. So now, which is the weight of the Heifers at the first calving, considering the weight and the age you showed us in your Heifers, and how do you measure mature body weight in dairy farms where they don't have a scale? Magic.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so the target weight is to be at least 80% of mature weight at calving. We are, especially coming off of summers like this, we're usually a little light. And so the last weight I have is at about 6 weeks pre-calving. So I usually will do I'll try and guesstimate as to what the calving weight would be. But at that 6 weeks pre-calving, we're averaging a little over 600, right around 600 kilos, which will put us pretty close to target. I double check that by looking at the first lactation milk yields versus the milk yields of the mature cows. There is a awesome relationship there, that whatever that percentage is of first lactation milk versus mature milk is basically identical to what the body weight of those heifers are. So if I go in and I don't have body weights on cows, but I have milk weights, I'll do a quick calculation using milk weights to see what that relationship is, and that will tell me how far off the heifers are. And if I don't have scales on a farm, I will go do heart girth measurements. It's not perfect, but at least it's given me some numbers to work with. And it's probably better than trying to use cull weights, because a lot of the times the cull cows don't represent what the true cow should look like. And if I was consulting full time, I would spend the money and get a set of portable scales. They're not that expensive, and the amount of information that you can get off of using scales is tremendous. I don't think we're anywhere close to really appreciating the value of all that of that body weight data.
Okay. Keep going, Paula.
Okay.
God, you're working me.
Paula always works you.
Yeah, I know.
Yes. Okay, you talked about birdseed line. Could you bring us more detail of this grass used as a silage in the diet?
I'll read canary grass.
Mm.
That's what it's a cool season grass. In Argentina, you would be able to grow it successfully, probably starting about 300 kilometers south of Buenos Aires. It really requires similar growing conditions as ryegrass.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. And the last question, when you talk about high protein content in the diet of the heifers, what values do you mean?
Well, I will not tell you what that number is because I'm not going to give you a crude protein number because it's
Okay.
meaningless. I will say that I will always run on my heifer diets. I will, at a minimum, have MP allowable gain at a minimum 100 grams greater than energy allowable gain. That could be at 12% protein. That could be at 20% protein.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, Paula, are you done with questions?
Yes.
I think we're done with questions
Are
unless
you
somebody sends something.
Well, hopefully, I hear Chile is their vaccination's really good. So I think we really need to be talking about, potentially doing a session in person. And I think
Yes.
the safest place to do it would be Mendoza, because I could fly into Santiago and just go over into Argentina.
Yes, you're right. I think you're right.
Paula, I thought your doctor told you you needed to travel.
Yes, I know.
Really? Your doctor told you that?
No, your doctor.
Oh, hell. My colleagues are openly saying, God, we can't wait till Tom starts traveling again.
It's been interesting.
They want you. They want you to be happy. That's why.
Yeah. They love me in small doses. Sort of like my wife and daughter.
Yeah, they're also wondering when he's traveling.
I mentioned, a couple of weeks ago that I was thinking of going to Italy in early November, and my wife didn't even blink, and my daughter was like, "Oh, I want to go with you." And when I said yesterday that I'm probably not going, they both looked at me like, "Damn."
Oh,
All right. Well, Paula, thank you so much. And, someday I'll be able to see you and give you prizes for all that you go through.
no, you don't have to. Thank you both of you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
I love these. I actually enjoy the webinars with Argentina the most because we get such good questions. So I appreciate the willingness to ask questions and seek more answers. And it's always fun to do them with Tom. So everybody that attended, thank you. And thank you for hanging in. It was good to see some faces that I have, well, some names of people who I haven't seen in a while. So that was really nice. And we will see you next month, we hope. All right, everybody.
And hey, anyone that is in the US, next week's Cornell Nutrition Conference, if you're coming and you want to have continuing discussions on this, let's see. What should we do? Should we do a glass of wine per question will be the charge? I think that'll be fair. Everyone around me is just waiting for next week. My colleagues are like, "Oh, we're gonna drink." I'm like, okay.
And if you want to delve in more on that, making sure your solids are balanced, ask me about Mix-a-Lot.
Absolutely.
So Brittany knows. All right. Good night, everybody. And good day wherever you are. And thank you so much for coming. We'll see you next month.
Ciao,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.